us now. We don't glow. Take a look at me now.
Welcome back. Still Sunrise right here on Channels Television. We switch gears now from all of the conversations we've had to something a little different. And we have joining us Mr. Miracle Ihoma is a clinical psychologist as we talk about childhood trauma on adulthood. I like the phrasing in itself because sometimes we take these things for granted. I know that from a layman's point of view, Doctor, you just see adults exhibit certain tendencies and you're confused, like what exactly is going on? How was this person raised? Exactly what did he go through? And then we have the multiplicity of these persons in the public and private sector, heading systems, heading organizations, heading government. But as a general, opener, what do we make of this subject matter?
Yes, and just like you rightly said, everybody came from somewhere. And if you go back in time, John Locke, a psychologist, said that when a person is born, their mind is tabula rasa. What that means is they were born a blank slate. There was nothing written on the sheet of their minds. So that's why a child cannot walk, talk, he doesn't know what he wants and things like that. But then as he begins to interact with the external environment, then people or the adults and handlers in his or her life begins to write on the slate of their mind, and that begins to form their behavior, begins to form their values, their beliefs, their language, their memories, what we call their meta programs as well, and things like that. And as that child grows up into adulthood, a lot of their behavior, a lot of how they see the world, a lot of how they see themselves will come from how they have been raised in childhood. So we could say that a person's adulthood can be traced to their childhood, how they were formed, because three major things form a person's behavior, a person's values, beliefs, language, memories, decisions, and things like that. And they are upbringing. Upbringing is the family you grew up in, the primary agent of socialization, right? That's number one. Number two is environment, the kind of environment you grew up in. That now talks about the secondary agents of socialization, the schools you went to, the kind of religious organization you had, the friends you decided to keep. And then thirdly would then be what we call significant emotional experiences. And what are significant emotional experiences? They're experiences that are significant enough to alter a person's values or beliefs or perception about themselves and the world. So any experience a person has, it could be that your father told you that you were good for nothing at age 5. It could be that your teacher told you you could not make it at age 15. It could be that you were sexually abused at age 7. It could be that you were verbally abused. You were woken up with insult, sent back to sleep with insult, by your caregivers as a child. All of that, if it affects how you see yourself, if it affects how you see the world, then that's what we call a significant emotional experience. Yeah.
It's a lot. That's a lot to take in. So the reason I had to phrase and frame my question the way I did is that it's about when somebody becomes an adult, for instance, and begins to exhibit certain tendencies. Now, if that's how the person was raised, how the person was built, sometimes it's difficult for people to really be able to reach the person to say, okay, this action of yours may not be altogether put together. I'm just trying to be diplomatic here. Because people go out with take me the way I am. That is where I am. How do you manage this kind of scenario?
Yeah, so I tell people that we must differentiate between who you are and who you have become, because a lot of the times people are not able to differentiate both. So, for example, somebody has or displays a bizarre behavior, an obvious weakness in character or attitude, and says that's who I am. Let's use say anger as a case study. So somebody gets angry easily, yells at people, and says that's who I am. That's how we are in our family. If you even meet my mom is even worse than I am, right? But that's not who you are. That's who you have become based on the environment that you grew up in. So it's very important to differentiate between who you are and who you have become. When you are able to draw the line, it is easier to then seek help and know this is a weakness. It's not a strength. And that's where healing begins rather. Because if you can't own up to your weaknesses and the areas where you need to work on, then healing cannot even start. So you need to know, okay, this is who I am, and this is who I have become. For example, we must differentiate between personality and character. Character is who you are. Personality is who you are. Character is who you have become. Because personality is a set of characteristics that differentiates a person from other people and must have been formed before the age of 18 and must not be due to any form of head injury, drug inducement, or things like that. But then character is as a result of how a person was acculturated, how a person was conditioned by the three things I mentioned earlier. So while, for example, there might be two people who have similar personalities, they can have two separate characters. For example, let's say two people are quiet. It doesn't necessarily mean, and that's why I tell people that, of course, we have seen that quiet people can be murderers, quiet people can be rapists, quiet people, can also be gentlemen, can also be good people in the society. So the quietness is the personality, but then the behavior, their attitude to situations and to other people is now the character. So we shouldn't judge people based on their personality. We should judge them based on their character. So at the end of the day, it is that we must differentiate between who you are and then who you have become.
And when does this become trauma? Because that's essentially what we're talking about.
Yeah.
When we say, childhood trauma and, as it relates to adulthood.
Yeah.
So when does it become trauma? By the time you're an adult and you're exhibiting some things,
yeah.
When do we start saying, oh, this is because of a traumatic childhood?
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that you have said that forms a child, and when you get older and then you begin to exhibit depending on how you grew up.
Yeah. So any first of all, any maladaptive behavior is most likely coming from a traumatic event in a person's life, because trauma is not just what happens to you, it is your response to what has happened to you that we call trauma. Right? It is the impact of a particular event on a person's mind, body, and behavior, and how that stretches beyond the bandwidth of the person's coping mechanisms, or how the person can cope, that we call trauma. So and trauma affects an individual's perception of themselves in terms of how they see and how they feel about themselves. So, for example, when a person displays low self-esteem, for example, because if somebody has gone through traumatic event, it might affect their self-esteem, how they view themselves, right? It might affect how they also relate with themselves in terms of their beliefs. So a person, for example, can believe as a result of a traumatic event that they have gone through that they are not good enough. A person can believe that Igbo people are ritualists. Can have formed those generalizations. Oh, Yoruba people have this set of behavior based on the experiences, traumatic experiences that they have had. It could also affect their perception of other people and their relationship with other people as well. This talks about how they relate with others, how they form relationships. For example, we have seen people who have what we call avoidant attachment styles, anxious attachment styles. What are attachment styles? Attachment styles are basically how we form intimacy in relationships. So there are people, for example, who avoid intimacy as much as possible. It's coming from a traumatic event. It's possible that as a child, that person lost maybe a parent or a loved one. It's possible that he experienced some sort of divorce or separation from the parent, and that formed an attachment style in that child, so that as he grew up and then wanted to form intimate relationships with other people, that traumatic event keeps to play on his subconscious mind.
Don't
to
get
say,
too close.
if I get too close, what if I lose this person at the end of the day? Yeah, so that is also, and it could be anxious as well, where people become clingy. They display clingy behavior, where they want to hold too tightly And it could also be as a result of losing a loved one, experiencing a heartbreak at some point that has then formed that traumatic experience.
Sorry, what about people that tend to use some of their childhood experiences to determine their own future? For instance, I've had people say, I'm skeptical about getting married because I've not had very good examples of marriages growing up, maybe separated the parents, maybe death of an aunt or uncle, and the effects on the spouse of the person that died, and different things. So young people, I'm talking about people that are just about 30, saying, I don't think I want to ever get married because of some such things. I mean, how can that person get help? Because I know that you are a specialist in this area. How do such people, get help such that you can actually help them deal with that trauma and they can move on with their lives?
Very good question. I must say this at this point, that people respond to trauma differently, right? So there are typically, say, 3 responses to trauma. It's either you have the fight response, the flight response, or the freeze response. So for somebody, for example, who has said, I'm not going to get married because I experienced a turbulent marriage while I was growing up as a child, that person is most likely using the flight response. He's trying to avoid that marriage in order not to experience the same thing that he or she saw or experienced as a child. And first of all, again, that person needs to realize and see that there's an issue here. Because I've come across those kinds of people, for example, and some of them don't see an issue with that. They see it as, okay, all the marriages I've seen are not working, so why then should I get married? But then I am very quick to point them to the fact that what is happening to them is confirmation bias. So what they are always looking, because you would see, let me give an example with a particular lady I was speaking to at one time. She said, all marriages are bad, everybody's getting divorced and all of that. And I just asked her a simple question. I said, what about your parents? Are they still alive? She said, yes. Are your parents still together? She said, yes. I said, how come your parents are still married and yet you are making reference to this marriages of celebrities who are far away from you, who don't know you, who you don't really know personally, and can't take reference from your direct parents who are still married to say, if my parents are still married, after this many years, maybe I can give marriage a chance, right? So what has happened with those sets of people is they are looking for marriages that are not working to confirm their bias, of marriages, the fact that marriages are no longer working. So it is important to first of all see that there is a problem in itself, that's a challenge, is a weakness, and then it is from that perspective, that self-awareness, they can now seek help to say, okay, I need to talk to somebody who can really help me deal with this.
Is there anybody who is really normal?
Well,
and what does normal mean from a psychologist's point of view?
I usually like to say everybody has a baggage, right? But the difference is the weight of our baggage is usually not the same, right? And so while everybody, even on this side of this program, we all have baggages, but the size of our baggage, the weight of our baggage differs from person to person, right? It's the same way, two people can be sick, but one person can have maybe flu and another person has cancer. Even though they both have illnesses, you can't compare, right? So it's really about always being self-aware and always getting better, being open to seeking help, being open to improving and making progress. Because perfection, for example, is an illusion. It's something that can never be achieved on this side of eternity, but we can make progress, right? We can get better today than we were yesterday. So that's really
yes,
the point.
The reason I asked that question, it looks like is this society that defines normal? Because there's a fallacy called the false dilemma, where it's either white or black, one or two, and there's the issue of whether or not a particular emotion is good or bad, depending on how you deploy it. That is the premise of my engagement here. Okay. And I want you to nexus it with Gen Zs, who are going to be parents in the next 20 years. And when we see how they exhibit, they have some great stuff, but they have some very disturbing concerns as well. What do you make of it?
Yeah, so very good point that you've made, right? It's really, so when we talk about maladaptive behaviors, it has to be behavior that causes distress to yourself or to other people. Yeah, so if it is distressing to you, it is a call for concern for you in terms of how you feel, in terms of how you think, how you process your thoughts, and also if it's a cause for concern for how you also relate with other people, how you form relationships with other people, then we then say that this is a maladaptive behavior. So while we don't have an issue if you feel and think a particular kind of way because you are in this world with other people and your actions and inactions will get to affect them one way or the other, then there is a generic way to see normalcy, right, or to interpret normalcy, right, because our behaviors would affect people. And when over time it has been seen that this particular kind of behavior, for example, causes stress to other people around you and even to you as an individual, then we then say, okay, this is not a normal behavior, it's something that needs to be worked on. And in relation to the Gen Zs, just like you said, you know, they are very, very good traits that come with that generation, but also there are challenges that come with it. And
I'm referencing their mental stamina. I'm a millennial.
Yes.
Our generation has significant stronger mental stamina. Maybe we're not exposed to some of the things that they are exposed to now, because they're quick to say their mental health and all of that. We did not have that luxury.
Yes.
What was even mental health in the first place?
Exactly. Yeah. So you also would agree that the baby boomers also had more mental resilience than even the millennials. Yeah. Because it looks to me, and somebody rightly said, that good times actually create or produce strong people. Strong people create, good times create weak people. Weak people create weak times, rather challenging times, and challenging times would bring out strong people.
So when it's
strong people would then produce those good times, and those good times will then produce weak people. So it's a cycle. It's a cycle.
I like the way you put it.
It's a cycle. And you would see that the baby boomers, which is a generation just before millennials, had more mental resilience than the millennials. Millennials have more mental resilience than Gen Zs. Gen Zs most likely would have more mental resilience than Gen Alpha, and Gen Alpha than Gen Beta, right? Because it is the cycle, it is the peculiarities of the generation that they are born into. And there are two reasons why it looks like they are shouting mental health. One is awareness. There's more awareness now than it used to be. So people now even know what is mental health in the first place. Just like you said, when we're grown up, if you say mental health, nobody will understand what you're saying. What do you mean by mental health? You say you can wash plates, you are saying mental health. So it won't
and they'll give you a manual reset.
Exactly.
Just in
it won't make sense. So there's more awareness now, and the second part to it is there is less resilience now than there used to be, right? Maybe because maybe it also came with the level of awareness, because people didn't really know what mental health is, so people rugged, or just made things work, roughed it out, in that sense. So I think that that's what has really played out in why Gen Zs are always screaming mental health and all of that.
Wow. That's still a lot.
It's a cycle that I'm just processing. You have more questions, sir?
Well, so how do we, get around all this? What do you do when you have people coming in to say, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with that? What are the treatment options for people dealing with trauma? How do they get out of it? Does everyone get out of it, or is it just Some people, they have to get therapy for life, or it's just for a moment and then they can move on.
Yeah, again, people respond to therapy differently.
Yeah.
So there are people, for example, who will need therapy for the rest of their life. There are people who even will experience what is called automatic remission. They won't need therapy. They will just, find a way and get better. There are people who will need therapy because, again, there's a difference between therapy and therapeutic interventions. So, for example, there are things people do that are therapeutic. They might not even know. Yeah. So, if somebody, for example, practices gratitude, they might not know that what they are doing is therapeutic and is helping them in more ways than they know. Yeah. There are people, for example, who have strong support system. They grew up in an environment where they have, a good support structure in their families, in friends, and what have you. And they didn't even know that in itself was what helped them to be able to go through difficult times and come out on top. So people have those kind of structures, and it could help, right? But I usually recommend that when you see visible trauma that is affecting you and affecting people around you, relationships around you, it's important to seek help from a professional, right? And the professional will definitely know what to do from there. There's trauma-based therapy, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, and things like that are used to help people who are dealing with traumatic events in their life.
That's as we need to wind down. I cover, like all of us, cover public sector. And sometimes we see people exhibit tendencies, even in public offices. Now, the populace are the recipients of those excesses at the end of the day. And everybody's literally screaming at the top of their voice, not knowing where this is coming from. So if you were to educate the populace, for instance, looking at their public servants, politicians, and all of that, and how they can respond to them based on the trauma they've taken to office, what would they be?
So I'm educating the populace on what again?
On the trauma exhibited by public officials.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Penchant for stealing, subverting the system.
Yeah.
Those are tendencies. We look at those things as culture. There's something beyond that.
It is actually.
There are certain people, even if you put the best of monies in their front, they will not move an inch to touch it. But some, behind the money, they'll find it.
Yes, I agree with you. A mentor of mine will usually give this example in the family system. He would say that there's a father, a mother, and 2 kids, right? The father drinks. He goes out every day, drinks, comes back home drunk every night. The wife tells him, honey, you need to stop drinking. This drinking is not helping you, neither is it helping our family. The 2 children tell him, Daddy, you need to stop drinking. We don't like the fact that you drink. But then he says, who are you to tell me what to do? I'm the man of this house. I'm the husband and the father of this house. I can't stop drinking. I will do what I say. And what I say is what we stand. Now, an election has taken place, right? And that election was 3 against 1. 1 was for drinking, 3 were against drinking. Yet who won the election? 1 won the election. So rigging started from the family. So you see that a lot of people then carry those things from the family system into public life, right? Because it is, for example, abnormal that somebody will steal all they can or they steal and sit on the can. Steal everything that there is and still not satisfied. It is coming from trauma. But we must understand that, and this is to the public, that everybody in public office is coming from somewhere, right? It's coming from a family, and that's why we must take family education very seriously. We must take parenting education very seriously, because everything stems from the family. The family is the production factory of the society. So if we get it right in the family, we'll get it right in the society. So these people in public office are also human beings that have gone through things, and while we must cut them some slack in some areas, we must also hold them accountable in other areas, and also see how we can help them get help.
Fantastic point you've raised. Miracle Homa, clinical psychologist. I have 1,001 more questions for you, but I don't have the luxury of time.
Yeah.
And it's not trauma. It's just training.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming on the program. We do appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, superstar. Well, he's a veteran in this game. Obi Emeloye, filmmaker, director, producer. He has so many things that I don't want to list it out, but seeing it, some of them I didn't know before. But I'm sure you watched that movie, perhaps not the most popular one, Last Flight to Abuja.
Yes.
It was a blockbuster, The Mirror Boy. We can go way back. Some person may not have been born watching us when some of these movies are played, but it's all fine. We're going to be talking to the man behind all of these movies and more. But hey, before we do that, let's tell you that on our DSTV platform, we'll be going over to Clarion University maiden convocation in Nekede Owerri. It's taking place live, but we will be on all other platforms across, but we have several other platforms. In just a moment, we'll be back with Obi Emeloye, the filmmaker. Join us again.